So I just made a video on the topic of whether or not it's better just to invest into SCHD or the top holdings within SCHD. And I gotta say this, the results were pretty interesting. However, I wanted to do it again with more numbers, more data, more stocks, and of course, more nipples. So if you don't get it by now, this is part 2. Go ahead and watch part 1 to figure out the pros and the cons of going with either strategy or methodology and to get up to speed on what we're trying to do here today. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the video. And by the way, my name is Amos and I'm the kind of stupid that likes to pick and invest into individual stocks. Here in Japan today, it's raining a lot. So if you hear raindrops in the backdrop, it's not me adding that as a music in the background, but it's actually what's panning out. But all that to say, for the most part, I think a majority of people out here, you could just do SCHD, call it a day, you're good to go for the next 20, 30, 40 years. But I'm a special type of stupid who thinks he can beat SCHD and the type of idiot who thinks he can beat the S&P 500 year after year. So I continue to do individual stocks with a little bit of SCHD. And what we're about to do right now is put SCHD up against the top 25 holdings within SCHD itself. So right below the company name itself, we're going to input the dividend yield and the 5-year total return, because in the past 5 years, every single company on this list should have experienced the pandemic rebound, the 2022 bear market, and the current fiasco and debacle that's happening with the tariff wars. Basically, what I'm saying is everybody had the opportunity to experience a bull market and a bear market. So the 5-year ROI, this includes their share price appreciation, but also the dividends that were paid out. Before I reveal the results, what do you think? Out of the 25 top holdings, do you think SCHD is going to beat all of them for the past 5 years? Or do you think a majority of them will give SCHD the little brother treatment? Well, let's find out. As we scroll to the right here, the first one is obviously going to be SCHD. Their current dividend yield is 4%. And their 5-year total return, if you had invested into them, would have been 95%. Which I think is pretty respectable with a capital R. The first and the biggest holding is going to be Coca-Cola, going up against SCHD. And their current dividend yield is 2.8%, and their total return for the past 5 years, 86%. So, SCHD 1, the top 25 holdings, 0. We move one more to the right, we have Verizon. Their dividend yield right now is 6.3%. And you might be like, dude, that's juicy, that's fantastic, that's phenomenal. What's the catch? Well, the catch is in the past 5 years, their total return, including that high dividend yield, is negative 1.4%. That is atrocious. However, this is where the tide turns in the favor of the individual stocks, because ConocoPhillips' current dividend yield is 3.4%. Their 5-year total return, friends and family, I'm not joking, 206%. 206% to that of SCHD's 95%. So currently we have the first winner out of the individual stocks. The next one is Altria. Their current dividend yield is 6.9%, and their total return for the past 5 years, 122%. Friends and family, the second winner in the individual stocks. So 2 out of the 25 has beaten SCHD so far. So out of the top 4, 50% or half of the holdings beat out SCHD by a huge margin, I would argue. 95%, 122. The next one to round out the top 5 is going to be Lockheed Martin. Current dividend yield is 2.8%. By the way, they just lost their contract to make the F-47 to Boeing. You gotta be kidding me. I mean, no disrespect if you work for Boeing, but dude, their planes are literally falling out of the sky left and right almost every quarter. To pick them over Lockheed Martin, dude, that's a missed opportunity. But anyways, 2.8% dividend yield, 5-year total return, just shy of 40%. They severely underperformed SCHD. Next one is PepsiCo, 4% dividend yield, and they severely underperformed SCHD. Next one is Home Depot, 2.5% dividend yield. Total return, they barely just underperformed SCHD at 91% total return. And then we have the next winner, which is Chevron, a 4.9% dividend yield with a 99% total return. That's pretty darn good. That means with Chevron, you would have almost 2x'd your money in 5 years, which I think is pretty good. 3 out of the 25 so far have beaten SCHD in performance. The next one is Amgen, 3.4% dividend yield, 38% total return. That is not good. Next one is Cisco, 54% total return. Not good. Next one is Merck, a 20% total return. Dude, what are they doing with these top 25 holdings? My goodness. I mean, obviously, you have some beautiful, delicious companies like Altria, ConocoPhillips represented, but then you also have Verizon at a negative 1.4%. Like, what are they doing? And just as I was about to go on a rant, check this out. The next one is Bristol Myers Squibb, a pharmaceutical company. Total return, negative 6%. What good is it to have a dividend yield of 5%? That is pretty darn good, only to have your money shrink by negative 6% in a span of 5 years. That's not good. However, the redeeming factor is the buddy right next to them, AbbVie. We're talking about 164% total return in 5 years. That is beautiful. The next one is going to be Texas Instruments. Surprised that this is in SCHD, but their current dividend yield is 3.3%, and their 5-year total return is 63%. They did not beat SCHD. And then we have UPS, a 6.6% dividend yield. 5-year total return is 17%. No bueno, but the one right next to it, EOG, 3.4% dividend yield, and the total return for the past 5 years, 233%. But dude, he's about to one-up him, because the one right next to him, One Oak, is a 4.7% dividend yield, and the 5-year total return is 327%. So 6 out of the 25 have beaten SCHD so far. And the one right next to it, Schollenberger, 3.2% dividend yield, 5-year total return, 140%. So maybe the rest of this list will beat SCHD? I guess we'll find out. The one right next to him also beat SCHD, Fastenal. Their dividend yield is okay at 2%. I feel like that's the minimum standard to have a decent dividend yield, at least 2%. And they're meeting that qualification. However, their total return, the redeeming factor, 159%. That is beautiful. For your money to grow 159% in a span of 5 years through the share price appreciation in the stock market plus the dividends paid out, dude, I like it. I'm going to have to reconsider this company. I always dismiss them, but I think I'm going to take a closer look at them because I think their performance, financials, and the business operations itself seem to be doing pretty well. 8 out of 25 have beaten SCHD so far. So I really think up until this point, it really depends. SCHD versus individual holdings. I mean, if you do go the individual route and you feel absolutely bullish towards Bristol Myers Squibb and Verizon, and those are the two that you pick in lieu of SCHD, dude, you would have been absolutely frustrated, disappointed, and angry. But on the other hand, if you would have invested into ConocoPhillips and Altria, part of the top 4, you would be a pretty happy camper. So I think it really depends so far. But let's keep going. There's more to go. Next one is Kimberly-Clark, ticker symbol KMB. Everything and anything to do with paper-related products, diapers, toilet paper, and the list goes on. A 3.8% dividend yield, but the total return in 5 years is 11%. That's atrocious. I'm sorry. If you're invested into them, that is the facts, right? That's what it says. 11% total return. And the one right next to them is Target. They are currently going on a massive sell-off, and I personally think that Target is in that undervalued category now. With that said, when I sold out of them at about $140 a share earlier this year, at the time, I thought Target was undervalued. But for them to go down by $40, $50, $60, it's like, dude, they're in this massive clearance section, and I'm not going to invest into them because there's other companies that I'm eyeballing, the ones that I fancy more that are on my watch list. So Target, I understand why you would want to invest into them, but for me, I think it's a pass. And it's a negative 0.4% total return in the past 5 years. That is it's pretty bad. Ay, ay, ay. The next one is Ford Motors, a 7.4% dividend yield, past 5 years, 157%. That's actually quite juicy. 9 out of the 25 companies have beaten SCHD so far. And to round it out, we have General Mills. Dude, a 9.9% for the past 5 years. I get it. Pretty atrocious, but I think it's because food CPG companies, since the end of 2022, they've seen better days, right? The stock market, Wall Street, and investors are treating them like they have leprosy or they're like disgusting and they're smelly. But the fact of the matter is their business operations and fundamentals still look pretty good to me. So I'm picking up shares of it. I'm not telling you to do it. That's not financial advice, but I would rather buy them while they're on a discount. The one right next to them, I'm also a shareholder of, and I truly believe in their mission and their future. It's just right now, the price of coca, historic highs. So I get why their margins are being crushed. But anyways, their total return for the past 5 years is 35%. The 25th holding is going to be Darden Restaurants, ticker symbol DRI, 2.7% dividend yield, and their total return, this is delicious, by the way, 236%. My goodness gracious. And it's not just because the channel's name is Dividend Compounders with Cheese. However, some of the companies that I really like to invest into are in the restaurant industry and category. Reason being is that their business model, super easy to understand. Number two, they tend to have really good margins. And number three, it's a product or service that will always have a place in society. We're always going to be eating out or eating food in general. So when I think about their future and place in society, I feel safe when I invest into companies like Darden or Texas Roadhouse or McDonald's. By the way, I'm not a shareholder of Darden, but I truly like this company. As of right now, I think they're overvalued. I'll get off my soapbox as to why I like restaurant stocks so much. Anyways, the results are 10 out of the top 25 holdings beat out SCHD, a success rate of 40%. I'm not gonna lie to you. As I was conducting this research and experiment, I was taken aback because SCHD itself beats out 15 out of the 25 top holdings. That's pretty remarkable to say the least. However, now we're gonna take it a step further and we're gonna take 3 out of the 10 winners to see how your money would have compounded through individual holdings versus SCHD itself. So the first company is going to be Fastenal, ticker symbol FAST. And as we take a look at their dividend profile, this is pretty darn good. I mean, yes, their dividend yield is not the greatest, but it is decent and sustainable. And the number that I care about is the growth rate. For the past 5 years, this number right here has been growing at a rate of 12% year over year. And they've been doing it for 26 years in a row. And they don't show any signs of stopping. But also joining Fastenal in this experiment is going to be Darden Restaurants. For the past 5 years, their dividend growth rate is 16%, which is pretty darn good. However, they are a dividend cutter because during the pandemic, they were experiencing a lot of heartache and setbacks. So as a result, they had to make a business decision to reduce and get rid of the dividend so that the business could stay afloat. So I don't like this number right here, how they've only been growing it for the past 3 years. Because when I know a company has it in their DNA to cut dividends, it means in the future when things get hairy and sticky and smelly, they're not going to hesitate to cut the dividend again. And as a dividend growth investor, that's one of the last things that you want to hear. Obviously, number 2 is your wife telling you, hey, your feet smell, can you shower again, even though you showered 3 times already. But number 1 is to know that my dividend compounder is cutting their dividend. That is terrible and bad news for me. And the third company to round out this list is going to be ConocoPhillips. And in the past 5 years, they've been growing their dividend at a rate of 16.5%, which I think is a little misleading. Because when we take a look at it visually depicted, in September of 2022, they paid out a special dividend of $1.40 alongside with their quarterly dividend payment of 46 cents. So they're not actually growing it at a rate of 16.5% year over year. Case in point, when we look at their dividend history, in 2015, it used to be like 73 cents, 74 cents every 90 days, and then they cut their dividend and went down to 25 cents, and it slowly made its way back up to the pandemic era where it was 42 cents a share, and then it bumped up to, wow, 43 cents. It went up by 1 penny. And then in 2022 and 2023, it looks like they added an additional dividend on top of their regular scheduled dividend every so often, as you can see. Like, you should be expecting one every 90 days or every 3 months, but they paid one in February and then paid another one in March and then another one in May and another one in June. So that's 4 in a span of 2 quarters. However, in the grand scheme of things, going from 73 cents in 2015 to what it is today of 78 cents in 2024, 2025, I think is a more accurate and a holistic picture when we assess their dividend growth history and profile. However, if we just look at the past 5 years, then I guess it's going from 42 cents every 3 months to what it is today of 78 cents. So it really depends on if you want to look out 10 years or zoom in and only look at the past 5 years. Now, with $10,000 invested into each one of those 3 top holdings of SCHD plus SCHD itself from January of 2016 to March of 2025, what are the results? Well, check this out. If you choose to invest into the winners of SCHD, this is what happens, right? Your $10,000 would have transformed with Fastenal into $48,000. That is pretty darn juicy. If we break that down year over year, that's 18.6%. That's the compound annual growth rate. The share price appreciation plus the dividends paid out reinvested into that initial $10,000. But on the other side of the argument is SCHD itself. $10,000 into $29,000 is nothing to belittle and dismiss because that's pretty darn good. To have a CAGR of 12.4%, dude, I would be really freaking happy. But if we look at Darden Restaurants, dude, they would have taken that $10,000 into $42,500, and their CAGR is 16.9%. And again, with ConocoPhillips, you would have slightly outperformed SCHD because they also turned that $10,000 into $29,000, but instead of $29,400, they turned it into $29,500. But broken down year over year, I feel like it's splitting hairs at that point. However, as you can see, if you are lucky enough to invest into the correct and the right winners in their top 25 holdings, you do beat the performance and your return on investment would have been a lot better than just investing into SCHD. But the key word here is being absolutely lucky, because out of the top 25 holdings, only 10 outperformed SCHD, at least in the past 5 years. But to take it a step further and do 10 years, I feel like the odds would go down. All that to say, that gives me compelling evidence for me to continue my path of doing individual stock investing, because it's like, dude, I feel like I could beat the odds. I know, I sound like an idiot, an addict, a gambler, and like a crazy cat person, but I'm also not delusional, so I do invest into SCHD itself as well. And by the way, I want to take this time to say, hey, the NFL draft happened today. I tuned in live from Japan, and I gotta say this. I support the Seattle Seahawks, as you can see. And with the 18th pick in the first round, dude, we took the guy that I was really hoping we would, Gray Zabel from North Dakota State University. He's a lineman that is super versatile. He played in all 5 roles on the offensive line. He's an absolute dog. I'm telling you this right now, I am so happy because a part of me was super fearful and anxious because I was like, dude, I really hope we don't go for one of the wide receivers. I don't want to name him because I don't want to be a hater, because we just lost DK Metcalf, right? So a part of the Seahawks community was like, dude, we need a 6'4", a 6'5" wide receiver so we could just toss the ball to them. They can jump up and get the ball. But I wasn't a fan of this player. However, with Gray Zabel, I was like, dude, I really hope we get him because we need all the help we can get on the interior line. So super stoked and really excited. By the way, who are you rooting for and who did your team pick? And crazy enough, the drama of the day is Shedeur Sanders was supposed to be a top 3, a top 5 pick overall, right? He fell out of the first round. Nobody picked up Shedeur Sanders. And the crazy thing is, the New York Giants even traded it up to pick up a quarterback, and it was not Shedeur. They picked up that dude from Ole Miss. What's his name? It's like Jackson, something with a J, Dart. They picked him over Shedeur. So that's pretty crazy. By the way, Gray Zabel in high school, he used to be a pitcher on the baseball team. His fastball was in the low to mid 90 miles per hour as a lefty. So this dude is an athlete. He's a dog. I'm super excited about the future of the Seattle Seahawks this year. Dude, super stoked. Now, the next experiment that I want to do is looking at SCHD versus the top 3 or 4 holdings, their dividend payout in the now and in the future. Because up until this point, we've only been looking at their historical performance, aka the past. However, some of us, like me, were interested in knowing how much dividends would we get today and in the future. So what you see on your screen right now is with $800,000 invested into SCHD, and with the assumption that their dividend payout is going to grow by their historical 20-year rate of 11.5% going forward, well, in year 1, with $800,000 invested, your annual dividend payout would be $32,000 in 12 months. That's pretty darn juicy and crazy. If you break that down every 30 days or every month, well, then that dividend payout would be $2,693, as you can see right there. That's pretty darn good. So what you're hearing is year one, $32,320. However, if we take this number right here and times it by their dividend growth rate, this is the number that you're gonna see the following year. Delete this zero right here. So your dividend payout in year two would be $36,000. This is under the assumption that you're not going to reinvest the dividends, meaning you're going to use that passive income to pay for the bills, to pay for going out to eat, to pay for the groceries, whatever it is, to pay for your haircuts. I know. I need one. The side of my hair, super long. This is like day 2 of me calling it out. I will get it cut eventually. So 36,000 the next year, and then so forth and so forth. 11.5% growth rate of this in year 3. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, if we take the top 4, in my opinion, out of the top 25 that we looked at earlier, and then make a dividend income portfolio out of those top 4 holdings, well, this is the difference. So if $799,990.51, a little less than the SCHD total cost, I would break it down into Fastenal, Darden Restaurants, ConocoPhillips, and Altria. This is not financial advice. This is just for entertainment purposes and an experiment to see what happens, right? I would break it down like this. About 51% of the portfolio allocated towards Altria because their dividend yield is the highest at 6.9%. I like that. And then the next highest with 25% allocation and weighting of this hypothetical dividend income portfolio would be ConocoPhillips, and then 12.5% allocated towards Darden Restaurants, 10% to Fastenal, and take a look at their historical dividend growth rates baked in. This would spit out an annual dividend payout of $41,312. If we break that down month over month, then the dividend payout would be $3,400. That is pretty darn good. Now, as a refresher, SCHD was $32,000 and the monthly dividend was $2,693. So if you just go with the individual holdings, you get a bigger dividend payout. However, the growth rate is going to be a lot smaller at 7.6%. To show you how that manifests, well, if we take this number right here and we times it by the growth rate, which is 7.63%, this is the dividend payout for year 2. You would get $44,464, which is still pretty darn good. So, as you can see, SCHD versus going with the individual top holdings within SCHD, I could see the argument for both sides, which I do go over in part 1, so watch that video, I don't want to repeat myself. However, one thing that I do want to call out is if you do go with these 4 individual companies, there is risk associated with, obviously there's risk associated with SCHD as well. Anything related to the stock market, there's risk. There's an element of risk everywhere. Even right now, if I choose to drive and go on the road and take off, I could get hit by a drunk driver. There's risk everywhere. However, by going with the individual companies, there is a little bit more risk in that they could face a setback or run into an issue that makes them cut their dividend. Whereas with SCHD, it's kind of diversified and the risk is slightly lower than going with the individual holdings. But I can see both sides of the argument and both sides of the coin. I think I can't go wrong with either one. But I do want to make this point. In this video, we only used the top 25 holdings within SCHD to go against SCHD itself. But what I'm telling you right now is if we look outside the box, there's dividend compounders that put SCHD into a headlock and make them tap out. There's so many dividend compounders out here that have a higher dividend yield, have a better CAGR, better performance. And if you're curious to know which companies that I'm referring to and talking about, then go watch the video that I made about the yield max alternatives, the stocks that I invest into instead of yield max and round hill ETFs. You'll learn a lot, and I talk about these stocks that are better than SCHD itself. Now, with all that said, a big shout out to the Patreon family. I love you guys. Thank you for believing and choosing to support me. I really am grateful. And for the rest of you guys, I love you. Stay safe and good luck in the stock market, and I'll talk to you really soon. Peace.